everyone, and welcome to this explainer. We're about to go on a seriously fascinating journey into the very foundations of how we actually generate human knowledge. It's really a story of evolution, moving from this old need for demanding absolute, rigid certainty to finally embracing the complex, messy nuance of the real world. Okay, let's dive into this. So let's start with a massive question. How do we actually know what is true? I mean, it sounds like a simple question, right? But it's deeply, deeply profound. As humans, we're basically born into a state of ignorance. It's our default setting. And honestly, it's a huge problem if we want to survive and thrive. The world is just full of chaos, competing opinions, and total illusions. So how do we separate fact from fiction? Well, we need a tool. A supreme, highly structured detective tool that allows us to look right past our own biases and figure out what is actually happening in the universe around us. And that ultimate detective tool at its baseline is research. Basically, it's the systematic pursuit of knowledge. It's a highly disciplined process of inquiry. We aren't just guessing here. We're actively seeking to explain, predict, and really understand phenomena. It's a structured investigation. And every single time we engage in this process, we have a clear goal in mind. We're either trying to validate the knowledge we think we already have, or we're trying to generate completely new insights that literally push humanity forward. But to do that effectively, we need a proper toolkit. Section 1, the blueprint of inquiry, types, and traits. Let's see how this investigation actually builds through different types of research, because they form a pretty brilliant sequence. Think of step 1, descriptive research, as taking a photograph. It perfectly captures what exists in a specific moment in time. But, a photograph only shows the surface. So we have to move to step 2, analytical research. If the descriptive study is the photograph, well, the analytical approach is the autopsy. It probes for the deeper causes and asks why things are actually happening. And once we know the why, we can use step 3, applied research, to dive in and solve practical, real-world problems. Finally, running alongside all of this the whole time is step 4, fundamental research. This is all about stepping back and expanding our broad theoretical understanding of the universe.
But here's the thing. Whether you're taking that descriptive photograph or conducting that deep analytical autopsy, your work has to stand on solid ground. So, all credible research absolutely must share 4 non-negotiable core traits. First, objectivity, ensuring you keep your personal bias entirely out of it. Second, precision, meaning you're measuring exactly what you claim to be measuring, no guessing. Third, systematic design, guaranteeing you have a logical, step-by-step plan. And finally, replicability, which is really the ultimate test. If someone else follows your exact steps, they should get your exact results, period. These are the traits that ensure findings aren't just a total fluke, but are actually credible and transferable. Now, for a long time, the scientific community took those traits to their absolute rigid extreme.
Section 2, the positivist paradigm, the era of rigid certainty. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how strict the philosophical foundation of research used to be. It was shaped by a paradigm known as positivism. It strongly emphasized observable facts, highly measurable variables, and the pursuit of universal laws through strict empirical methods. Under this old-school philosophy, the researcher was basically expected to operate with absolute neutrality and total robotic detachment. If something couldn't be strictly quantified and measured, it simply didn't matter. It was an incredibly rigid way of viewing the world. So what was the ultimate goal of all that strict quantification? 100% certainty. Under the positivist lens, the aim was total prediction and absolute certainty. A positivist basically looks at the universe, human behavior, and nature as a purely measurable machine. The belief was that, hey, if we could just measure everything perfectly, we could deduce the universal laws of everything with zero room for error. But the real world doesn't operate like a perfect, predictable machine, does it? And realizing that sparked up a profound evolution in how we think. Which brings us to section 3. The post-positivist shift, the era of nuanced truth. When you put these two philosophies side by side, the difference is just staggering. Positivism desperately holds on to absolute certainty, detachment, and those strict universal laws. But the modern shift, post-positivism, well, it actually has the humility to acknowledge a massive, undeniable truth, and that is, absolute objectivity is completely unattainable. We're human beings studying a complex world. We can literally never be entirely detached. Instead, post-positivism embraces knowledge that is probabilistic,
highly contextual, and crucially, fallible. Okay, there are three main pillars to this new mindset: probabilistic reasoning, critical realism, and reflexivity. Now, don't let the heavy academic jargon freak you out. They're actually super intuitive concepts. Probabilistic reasoning simply means we accept that we're dealing with probabilities, not absolute guarantees. Critical realism and reflexivity, they just accept that human knowledge is flawed and it's always shaped by its specific context. We have to constantly reflect on how our own presence and our own context shape the very things we're trying to study. We aren't standing outside the universe looking in, right? We're inside it, and that absolutely changes the view. And because that view is always shaped by context, we can't rely on just one single angle anymore. Which brings us to a really brilliant solution. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of triangulation. If all knowledge is slightly fallible, the absolute best way to strengthen our understanding is by combining multiple perspectives. Think about it like GPS on your phone. It uses multiple satellites to pinpoint your exact location on a map. Modern research uses triangulation to zero in on the truth. By overlapping perspective 1, perspective 2, and perspective 3, our grasp of reality becomes incredibly robust. This entire journey, moving from rigid certainty to nuanced understanding, is exactly what makes modern inquiry so rigorous and so adaptive today. And here is why this actually matters to you right now. These paradigms aren't just dusty philosophy for academics. They dictate the credibility of every single piece of data you consume in your daily life. When you read a new medical study about a trendy diet, or you look at a political poll during an election year, you are looking at the direct result of this evolution. Understanding this shift helps you see where a study might be claiming a bit too much rigid certainty and where it properly embraces context and triangulation. So, we've seen how the greatest minds in research literally had to abandon the comfort of absolute certainty to find a deeper, truer understanding of the world. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to end on. If the most rigorous, systematic inquiry on Earth openly accepts that our knowledge is always fallible and entirely context-driven, how certain are you of your own worldview? Keep asking those questions, always keep looking for multiple perspectives, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.